Welcome to Campaigns Highs and Lows for today. I'm Matthew Miller, coming to you from our Hong Kong office, where I'm here with Sun Chen Kong, my colleague. And for the first time, and this may explain why we're a little bit late getting on the air today, we have somebody joining us from a remote location. Jenny Chan, our reporter, is in Shanghai. And the reason that she's in Shanghai is going to be our first item that we're going to talk about today, and it's pretty much the item of the week in the region. And as you probably know, tomorrow is Double 11, Singles Day, the biggest e-commerce sales day in China. Last year did $17.5 billion, I think, is that right? On 17.6, okay. $6 billion, and there's something like 140,000 brands involved and 15 million products. You just get into superlatives when you start talking about Singles Day. We've been covering it kind of all week, looking ahead to it and talking about how brands are involved and how the event itself is changing. And so I am now going to toss to our colleague Jenny, who's in Shanghai, and we'll be covering it live tomorrow. If you are free on Saturday and you want to check out Jenny's live blogging on our site, you can do that. So Jenny, over to you. I'm going to let you just take it away.
All right, thank you, Matt. Yes, I'm right here out in Shanghai and right outside the Mercedes-Benz Arena, where tonight Alibaba's annual gala will take place. You can see there's Double 11 signs all over everywhere, and that's actually some black market selling black market tickets for tonight. But this whole thing about entertaining consumers while they're buying is a big thing for Alibaba. That's why we have the show, and a number of us have been doing it for the last few years. Now, tonight, who will see? We'll be seeing, Pharrell Williams, the likes of River Dance, Blue Man Group, Compressor Head, and also someone who's very, very popular among the Chinese consumers, the pianist Lang Lang. So what's the big deal with spending all this money to get all these stars together in one place? It's engagement for the Chinese consumer. So the whole show is a big draw for consumers who aren't able to attend in person. They can watch it on their Taobao app, and when the host introduces some interactive segments on the show, that's when they give up to 5,000 renminbi worth of red packets from the Hongbao, and once they get it, it's time to spend it right away, because when the gala ends at midnight, that's when the sale officially starts. And estimates so far of the total amount of Single Day sale this year, we have two public estimates, one from Oliver Wyman, one from Citigroup, respectively 2.9 billion and 24 billion respectively. So that is way more than the $17.8 billion that Alibaba alone raked up last year. So it is the maximum amount. We're talking about potentially $1 billion of sales every hour for this one day, 24-hour sale. So Alibaba's talking about big game this year. It is talking about 140,000 brands, 50 million listings, big numbers, and then 60,000 out of the 140,000 international brands reach the Chinese consumers' favor for certain categories like food. But we don't want to leave out JD, which is closest rival either. It's not talking of any big numbers. The reason is to say they have a different business model. They're not a platform like Alibaba, they are more of a large retailer. So you compare the number of brands with Alibaba, doesn't make sense, according to a spokesperson that I spoke to this morning. So he said we deliberately control the number of sellers on our platform, so to maintain quality. And compared to Alibaba, it's a free-for-all, including on his Taobao platform, a lot of low-quality merchants might not be allowed on JD. But if you look at the gross merchandise value for JD, it's nothing to be laughed at, because they are popular for consumer electronics, which has higher margins than fashion and consumer lifestyle goods that are more popular categories on Alibaba, according to many research estimates and predictions this year. But according to April numbers, there are at least 120,000 merchants selling on JD as of April. So it's also nothing to be laughed at, quite comparable to Alibaba. So let me toss back to Hong Kong, and you guys have been covering from the agency point of view. They've been pulling 48-hour all-nighters, and back to you, Hong Kong, too.
All right, great. Thanks, Jenny. That was great, and look forward to reading what you come up with tomorrow. So I'll turn now to Sun Chen, who has spent part of this week talking to some of the agencies that are helping their clients deal with Singles Day. So Singles Day is obviously a high in terms of the high amount of money that's involved, and it's low in terms of the low prices that you can get if you're approaching it as a consumer. But what if you're a brand and you're trying to figure out what's the best way to approach this yearly, orgy of consumerism? So over to you.
All right. So Singles Day is a happy day for the consumers, but for the brands and agencies, they have been working a long time for it. And today and tomorrow is going to be a 48 hours takeout in the office for the agencies, especially to do for optimized programmatic and adjustment of strategies. But this all started much earlier in the year, and some they have started after the June 618 JD.com sales. But for some of the agencies that I've spoken to, they are telling me that because this is not the first time that the brands are participating in Singles Day, so they have a lot of data and past experiences to learn from. And also this year, Alibaba has opened up more data with the uni marketing, so they have access to transactional data to know where they can target beyond the e-commerce platforms. But it all goes back to what brands want in the end. So, for example, like Jenny mentioned about the entertainment elements, extravagant fashion show. Alibaba had a fashion show earlier last week, which they also broadcast to TV for the first time. So they have many brands, fashion brands participating. But in terms of these fashion shows like this, the ROI is not really measurable because consumers may be watching the shows, but they may not be searching for the products or going to the Tmall page to buy the products. But they can still, like, for example, like TV, they can ship the TV, the phone, and connect to the page, but it may not really, well, it's very hard to measure how many viewers what kind of ROI can they achieve from all that. but it has certain benefits for some brands. For example, like fashion brands or very premium luxury brands like Estee Lauder or what they are participating. They may not do a lot of sales because it's not in their DNA to have slash sales. It will diminish their quality in a sense, diminish their premium status. So fashion shows like this are very good for brand engagement. So that's one way for the luxury brands to participate in single sales.
Yeah, I thought one interesting, I think it was in one of the stories we ran a couple days that you wrote, an interesting, the age-old question for a marketer, if you teach your consumer that you occasionally have deep discounts, then you've taught them to ignore you the rest of the time, and that could be a difficult, that's not a choice that most marketers would like to make. And one of your sources, I think, was talking about how to handle that kind of, in relation to this huge sale.
Yeah, but having said that, Singles Day is also for a day for brands to come out of the shell or behave rather abnormally, our expectations, and they can be forgiven for that. One of the agency e-commerce head that I spoke to from Kara, he said it's kind of like Halloween, that they can dress up, they can behave our character, strip off their suits, and they can be forgiven for behaving our character. So. And in terms of the spending itself, Singles Day takes up about 50 to 70% of all of total e-commerce spending. So that's because e-commerce spending itself is already 50 to 70% of digital spending. So you can imagine the scale of the money that brands and agencies, they are pouring into.
And so that's money going from the brand to the agency to sort of handle the real-time optimization and everything on the day. It doesn't count like the logistics part of it or anything like that. That's just
just media spending.
Brand activity. Media spending. Wow.
But in terms of e-commerce spending, it also depends very much on how the product landing, because for platforms such as Tmall, it depends on the product mix. Like consumers choose like what kind of products appear on the same page and all that. So it differs much from other kind of digital spending. Yeah.
We also talked this week a little bit about how Alibaba is making a concerted effort to extend the Singles Day sale not only beyond the borders of China, but also beyond the audience of Chinese people who are overseas and therefore have bank accounts and are aware of the sale. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the reason why they're extending to certain markets like Malaysia, Singapore, and Hong Kong, but it all depends on data because they are already seeing the transaction going on in Taobao. Taobao it's accessible on Lazada.com, one of the e-commerce platform bought by Alibaba last year. So there are very good reasons for them to go into this area. But for many of the non-Chinese consumers, but brand building is still a very important step stage that Alibaba has to go through, because not many know how to use Taobao or Tmall, the payment options, for example. But in those markets, like for example in Malaysia, Alipay has worked with one of the major bank, Maybank, to incorporate Alipay in one of the mobile payment systems. So that's one way to facilitate and make it a seamless process for consumers to buy on Taobao and Tmall. And one of the things that Jenny mentioned earlier was about the competition between JD.com and Tmall. And of course, it's only going to hit up this year, and consumers are obviously the benefit. Consumers are obviously going to benefit from that because they get more discounts. But it's a struggle and a juggle for brands, because they will have to choose how much to spend on Tmall and how much to spend on Taobao. Some of the agencies, they mentioned that it's 70% on Tmall and 30% on Taobao naturally, because Singles Day was started by Alibaba. It makes a lot of sense to pour money there, and it all goes back to following where the consumers are. But it's also a delicate business, and it's a very sensitive, because once you are spending on certain platform, the other platform will be more sensitive, and they'll be more cautious when dealing with certain brands. That's what the agency is saying, because it's all based on, in China, it all boils down to quantity, like relationship. You have to build the relationship with the platform. To get the best deal, it's not just a dashboard or numbers that agencies have to work with.
Cool. All right, great. I think we'll move on from Singles Day, but thank you both for that. And like I said, Jenny will have some live content tomorrow if you're interested in tuning in on a Saturday. Otherwise, next week we'll try to have some analysis and takeaways from what happens tomorrow. So enjoy. Moving on, our next item, I'm going to call this a high, also for a high amount of investment money that's going to be coming into Asia. So a story that we covered this week was that Vice Media, which has actually been involved in Asia since about 2003, announced that they're setting up a headquarters in Singapore by the beginning of next year, I think January, and also they will have, for the first time in APAC, CEO. So I think I was checking into it, and Vice Media has, they've gotten a lot of investment over the years, including like $450 million additional dollars in June. They're valued at $5.7 billion, and it looks like they're getting quite serious this time about entering Asia with a vengeance. So they're talking about having a full-service content operation and commercial operation in Singapore, which includes their own creative agency that they work with, and they already have some brands signed on. Let's see, I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm going to read it. They're working with Unilever in Indonesia, NBA in China, Nike in Thailand and the Philippines, BMW in China. And as another thing that they announced this week was expanding a partnership with Docomo of Japan to extend a streaming video service, and that one they're going to be targeting Singapore, India, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Thailand. So just thought that was worth noting. A sort of a major powerhouse in media, at least among certain demographics, and we'll be probably hearing a lot more from them in the next few years.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of content will come up from Wise for the APAC market, because currently I think their content is still very much US-centric and to a certain extent male-centric. Like they have the video on making weed-infused mace balls for one of the on the Facebook site, but because recreational drugs are nowhere near legalized in this part of the world, so and some of the content like very violent videos, animals battling each other.
Yeah.
So it's very much male-centric and to a certain segment of audience. So it'll be interesting to see how they'll plan out the content, especially in markets that are very sensitive. In Indonesia, they are getting more aggressive in recent years. So I hope will be more careful with these two markets, India and Indonesia.
Yeah, it will be definitely very interesting to see. They have had some content operation here, but really not very much. Fairly thin, so I would say it's hard to tell at this point, what the flavor of that content will be, but we'll certainly watch. It'll be fun. Okay, moving on to our final item. We don't often cover ads on this little broadcast because we try to stick with a little bit more meaty stuff. But this was an exceptional ad that we covered this week from a Asia-based brand, Samsung, of course, one of the biggest brands in the world, and the perennial #1 on our top 1,000 brands list. And if you haven't seen it, hopefully we'll be running it in the background over me talking, but this is done by Wyden Kennedy, Portland, and it takes the form of, I likened it to Boyhood, the movie Boyhood, which showed a young man growing up, and it's an example of Samsung, completely taking aim at Apple and making fun of them in a way. So it shows this young man maturing from a boy to a grown man who goes on to consider a Samsung phone when he grows up. And along the way, it sort of makes fun of some of the features that Samsung phones have that Apple phones don't. And it shows the guy standing in the rain waiting for his new Apple phone, before he wisens up, and follows the example of his girlfriend in the film and gets his Samsung. So I think I found it interesting, and I say it's a high just because it's hard to do that. It's hard for a brand to directly take on its competitor and speak directly to what it thinks is superior about itself without coming across too strong, making it too ham-fisted, But this worked really well because it was a nice story, and along the way you were getting, the digs into Apple, like when the guy drops his phone in the water and his iPhone is dead, of course, and has to be put in rice, while his girlfriend is like, no problem, she's back in business. So.
Yeah, but iPhone X isn't waterproof yet?
Which one?
iPhone X.
I guess the iPhone X is supposed to be, but I think I also read that it's one of the most fragile in drop tests.
Because it's glass case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Anyway, just as a reminder, we do a heck of a lot of coverage of new ads, and we hope that you'll check that out. And anything else to say? I guess that's it.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for your patience. If you were waiting by your computer for us to come on the air, we'll get smoother at bringing in people remotely. It was our first time. We appreciate you joining us each week, and we'll see you next time.